Well, hello everybody, wherever you are, whether you're here in our studio audience or in North Dallas or somewhere else around the world. Really, really glad that you're here. And these days, it's not bad to hear some good news, right? So you want to hear some good news? This is really cool. So I went to a restaurant, socially distant, I promise, and on this week, and I ran into a Chase Oker, who's a really cool guy, Ray Diaz, and he directs a ministry that we support through our Global Fund. Some of their stuff, and it's called Orphan Outreach, and we support some of the things they do in the country of Honduras, and one of those things is a fostering initiative it's a partnership with the government. Anyway, it's a really cool thing, and so saw him, and he said, hey, it's just really cool because it just happened. This happened yesterday, and here's what happened. This is good news for this little guy. So a few weeks ago, the police were called. They found a baby who was in a dumpster, abandoned in a dumpster, had been there, was probably about 3-4 days old, and was in tough shape, was in the hospital for a few weeks. But this Monday, little baby got matched with a family, and he had a tough first few weeks, but this little baby's going to do awesome in life. It's a great family, and I say that because you're part of the story as you support their work and through your generosity. So way to go, because you made potentially a bad news story become a really great news story. So thank you. Another piece of good news, a little less dramatic, is that we're continuing our series called The Secret Sauce, which is about relationships. And that is good news because we're looking each week in this series at some of the key components that make up the kind of relationships that God wants us to have and that we want to have too. And today what we're talking about is how to be there for somebody when being there is hard. As people go through all kinds of things and we need people in our corner, how to be there, how to show up. And even when I say that, how to be there, it sounds a little lame, just being there. It's kind of like when I was a kid, I tried this too late. I decided to do baseball. I was a hockey player, but I thought, hey, baseball looks easy. I'll do that too. And so I signed up for this baseball team. I don't even think I made it through the whole season. And it wasn't as easy as I thought, hitting the ball. And so I struck out a lot. And I didn't give the crowd of people who were cheering for our team much to work with in terms of positive things to yell, positive things to say. So the best it got for me was when, before I struck out, when I would just sit there or stand there and watch a pitch go by and hoping it was a ball. And if it was a ball, you may know what the crowd shouted out. If you're in the studio audience or home, just shout it out. What would they say? Good eye. That's right. Good eye. That's the best it ever got for me was good eye, which is nice, but it was so dejecting. Just hearing good eye, because it's not like you're a hero for, man, you're really good at standing there doing nothing while the ball goes and it happens to be a ball and you got lucky. Good eye. You're really good at just standing there doing nothing. And so it just was always, you walk back to the dugout and stuff. And being there can feel like somebody saying, good eye, way to be there, way to show up. I'm talking about when somebody's going through tragedy, when somebody's going through loss, when somebody's going through sickness, when somebody's overwhelmed. Sometimes it's hard to know what to do. And I know for me as a pastor, there's even some extra pressure I feel because I don't want to just show up. I want to fix it or say the perfect thing. Like not say something stupid. I want to say the perfect thing that just makes everything feel better. Pray the perfect prayer that just kind of changes the whole thing, and just being there can feel a little bit lame. But what we're going to see today is it's not. And it's actually a really powerful thing when you and I have people in our lives who are there for us when we need people and how to really be those. So we're going to talk about how to find those people, how to cultivate those relationships, but also how to be those people, how to be there, how to show up, because it's awkward sometimes. What do I do? What do I say? Do I go? Do I not go? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I say the wrong thing? I don't know. And so we're going to look at that because in life it's hard. And right now it'd be helpful to think about somebody that maybe you've even had the thought, I should reach out to them. Because there's a lot of people really overwhelmed right now. It's overwhelming for all of us. Life events like loss and grief and sickness and job loss and financial problems or anxiety, depression. Right now, parents and teachers who are trying to figure out how to do school at home or in the classroom and all this it's overwhelming. There's just a lot of overwhelmed people. And how can we be there for each other in a new way? And so you may want to just have somebody in your mind as we look at the New Testament to learn how to be there. And we're going to do that by looking at the Apostle Paul, who was the key leader in the New Testament church. He started a lot of churches. He wrote much of the New Testament, including the book that we're going to be looking at today, 2 Timothy, that he writes to his protege, Timothy was the person he passes the baton of ministry to, but he also super close friend. And Paul is writing to him at the end of his life. 2 Timothy was the last book Paul wrote, and he knew it would be the last book he wrote because he was in a Roman dungeon. He was in a very serious, bad situation, in a Roman dungeon, awaiting his trial before the Caesar Nero, and he knew that was not going to end well, and that he would be executed, and sure enough, that's what happened. He was beheaded eventually. And so he's in this dungeon. Picture rats everywhere, rotten food, dark, damp, terrible situation to be in. But he could have people, he could have visitors, and so we're going to see how he reaches out to Timothy for that. But just to give you an idea of what was going on, is really important before we jump into the passage, because this was not a good time to be in prison for being a Christian. And that was his crime, being a Christian. Because you may have heard about Nero in history or something. Nero, the one that some people said, there was a rumor that went around at that time, 2,000 years ago, that when there was a big fire in Rome and burned much of the city, and lots of bad things happened there. And the rumor was that Nero was in his palace overlooking the fires, thinking they looked so beautiful and playing the violin while he watched Rome burn. We don't know if that happened or not, but we do know the rumor was out there. The rumor was out there also that he started the fire himself in order to expand some of his palaces because he ended up doing that. So people were really mad. People were upset. So in order to take the pressure off of him, he spread a rumor of his own that Christians started the fire. Because the Roman emperors hated Christians because Christians didn't worship the emperor. They just worshiped God. And so he spreads this rumor and starts this massive persecution against Christians. It's brutal. In fact, there's a historian at the time named Tacitus who was not a Christian. And he writes about that, what Nero did. Ergo abolindo rumori. It's in Latin, which I know is not that helpful. So let me just... instead of trying to do the Latin, I'll just tell you what he said, okay, what Tacitus said. Because what Nero started doing to the Christians wasn't just arresting them and killing them. It was really overly cruel. For example, he would kill Christians for sport in the Colosseum. Tacitus writes about that they would sew these dead animal carcasses around them where the Christians could still move, and then they would release these wild dogs that had been starved for a long time, and they would come, and it was not good. Nero had these garden parties, and he would put pitch over people, Christians who were still alive, and light them on fire to light the garden party, thinking that was really somehow a great thing to do. And Tacitus writes that, hey, even Romans who didn't like Christians either, who didn't understand what was going on, were like, hey, this is a little bit much. It's a little bit overboard. But that's what was going on. And now Nero, the Caesar, has Paul right in the middle of all that, the key leader of the New Testament church, in his dungeon, in his prison. And it's a really bad space to be. And so from that, Paul writes to Timothy. And here's what he says in 2 Timothy 4:9 to Timothy. Do your best to come to me quickly. He's about 1,000 miles away, Timothy is, in Ephesus. For Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and has gone to Thessalonica. Only Luke is with me. Now, Paul always traveled with a team everywhere he went. And so he's used to having this team of people. And he writes about some other people that he sent different places. The team is dwindled down to 2 because he sent people on these different ministry assignments. And then it was Demas and Luke. But Demas bails on him, says because he loved this world, meaning he just didn't love God's kingdom enough. He was, he probably valued his life because it was dangerous to be around Paul. And he splits and goes to presumably his home in Thessalonica. So he leaves the team, and only Luke is with me, he says. Which, if you're Luke, you're like, really? Do you have to put only? But at least Luke is with me. He's awesome. And I don't think that's a slam on Luke. I don't think he's saying, Timothy, Luke's pretty lame. I need somebody else. He just felt alone, and especially because Timothy is like tighter than tight. And so he says, Timothy, man, I need you to be here. Because he's feeling alone. And I'm sure there have been times in your life you felt that way. And we certainly feel it when life all of a sudden starts going really badly. We can kind of get away with being fairly isolated in our life, not having a lot of close connection when things are going well. But when things start not going so well, we really realize how alone we are. And then you can relate to Paul. And Paul was exactly there. And it's a sad story so far, but it actually gets sadder. He says in verse 16, "At my first defense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. May it not be held against them." We talked about baseball. Picture a kid playing baseball looking for somebody in the stands who gives a rip, looking for parents or family or something, and nobody's there. But multiply that times 100. That's how he felt. Nobody stood up for him. And what he's talking about at his first defense is, as a Roman citizen, not everybody in Rome, most people were not Roman citizens, but Paul was. And that meant that you had this right to a first trial and a second trial. It's like we do. We have a grand jury, and you go through that to see, hey, should this go on to a real trial or not? So this is like the grand jury trial. And the way they would do that is you would stand before the judge. Sometimes as a citizen, it'd be Caesar himself that you'd stand before. And different people would come and they would speak on your behalf. So they would say, hey, Paul's not a bad guy like this people are saying. Like, he's a really good guy and he's a good citizen and we need, and they would speak for you. That was the whole thing, like to have people to speak on your behalf. And so Paul is there waiting for that to happen because there were Christians in Rome, and there were presumably people that were supposed to come because he said deserted me, and they didn't show up. Like, nobody came. Everybody that was supposed to come did not come, and you could tell it stings. It hurts. Wasn't an easy thing to do, though. We're talking about being there when being there is hard. Well, if you were a Christian then in Rome and you were going to go and stand up for Paul and stand by his side and speak for him, you're basically telling Nero, hey, I'm a Christian. If you want to light me up for the garden party tonight, here I am. I mean, it would have been risky. But it's obvious when you read the passage that Paul would have done that for them, but they didn't do it for him. And he says, may it not be held against them. I think he understands, and he's, forgiving and that kind of thing. He goes on, but the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength. Everybody else abandoned me, but not the Lord, because the Lord doesn't do that. So that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. So he's like, hey, the Lord was with me and he did strengthen me. And I even got to share about Jesus in the grand jury, and all these people got to hear about Jesus. And so it's not all bad. But in 2 verses later, here's what he's going to say. As good as it is to have the Lord at our side, and I don't know how you would possibly go through anything bad without the Lord by your side. And we don't have to. We'll talk about that later. But even then, with the Lord by our side, he still feels a certain amount of aloneness because he doesn't have people with him. And so therefore, a couple verses later, he says to Timothy, do your best, Timothy, to get here before winter. 1,000-mile journey back then was quite an ordeal. It took weeks to pull off. And so he says, man, leave now. Try to get here before winter. When he starts the book, he says, recalling your tears when they left the last time, there were tears. He said, I long to see you so that I may be filled with joy. He wants to see his friend. 4:9, do your best to come to me quickly. Word quickly means right now, ASAP, come. And we already read, do your best to get here before winter. He's saying, Timothy, I need you. This is the lowest time in my life. I need you here. And he knew, despite the trouble, despite the risk, He knew that Timothy would come. And that's why he says in 4:13, when you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas and my scrolls, especially the parchments. Notice what he says, when you come. He didn't say if you come. Because he knew that Timothy was a when you come kind of friend, not a if you come kind of friend. And I don't know if you have friends like that are when you come kind of friends, but those are the most valuable kind of friends. Those who will just be there and you know it. I've mentioned over the last few weeks how, and some of you have perked up on that and are praying for my brother, which I really appreciate because I've mentioned that he's sick. And I have one brother, one sibling, and he's not just sick. He has cancer, and it's not great, not good. He's been unresponsive for 2 months now. And my sister-in-law, Becky, is incredible, and she's just devoting all of her effort, all of her attention, all of her focus on caring for my brother, which means friends. I mean, we're all concerned about Becky, too, not just my brother, but Becky, and so her friends are concerned about Steve, my brother concerned about her. And she's so focused. She's not, it's hard to communicate with everybody. So one of her friends from San Antonio was just so concerned about her, couldn't get in touch with her, just didn't know what to do. And so she decided last week that she would, because of COVID, she didn't want to fly and then go over there. So she drove from San Antonio to Birmingham, Alabama, where my sister-in-law and my brother are, and just showed up at the house unannounced. And just knocked on the door and said, I'm here. She brought food and stuff for the family, but I'm here. You don't have to talk to me. You don't have to see me if you don't want to. If you just need to keep doing what you're doing, I get it. I just want you to know I'm here. And they were able to connect, and it was life-giving for her. But that's what we're talking about. Not a if you come kind of friend, but a when you come kind of friend. And, of course, that's a powerful thing to be. It's what Solomon talks about in Proverbs. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. That it's easy to be somebody's friends when it's easy, but when it's hard is when you know who your friends really are, right? Because they love not just in the good times, they love at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. And I think it's a great question to ask is, man, do I have people in my life like that? And I don't know. Maybe you say, maybe you do. I don't know. They think, well, how do I develop that? How do I get that? And let me encourage you that if you're not in a tragic situation right now, this is the time to do that, to take steps to develop those kind of connections and those kind of relationships. And in a great way to do that around here is groups, is to get in a group. Our church is built around groups. And that's true wherever you are around the world right now. We're doing online groups and virtual groups and in-person groups and hybrid groups. We're about to start all these groups here in just a couple weeks, and jump into one. Don't live an isolated life, because whenever I hear here at Chase Oaks, I hear about somebody who's going through something really difficult, some tragedy, some situation they've lost or something. My first question is always, are they in a group? And if I hear back, yes, they're in a group, then I'm like, oh, thank the Lord, they're in a group. Because I know how a Chase Oaks group is going to rally around that person or around that family. Doesn't make it all go away, but it's just so much better. I know they're going to be cared for by that group. But when I hear, no, they're not in a group, it's just like, I usually literally do this audible thing where I go, oh no. Because I know it could have been so different. Now as a church, we're going to do everything we can. We're going to try to connect with them and try to help them and all that. We're not going to just say, oh, well, they're not in a group, forget them. But also know how much better it would be if they were in a group. And so let me encourage you to get into a group. And then you think, well, okay, what about on the other side? How can I be there for people? The best way to cultivate those kind of relationships, people who are there for you, is to be there for them, is to be there for other people. And yet, how do we do that? Like, what do? We're talking about the power of showing up, the power of being there. But, I mean, really, what do you do? And we get a big clue in another passage in Paul's life where he's earlier in his life where he's going through a really difficult time. In fact, he's so down, he's so depressed. He says he despairs even of life, meaning like, I just don't even want to live anymore. And God pulls him out of that, and here's how. says, "For when we came into Macedonia, we had no rest, but we were harassed at every turn. Conflicts on the outside, fears within." That's such a cool phrase to me. Conflicts on the outside, fears within. So he had no rest anywhere. But God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus. God strengthened him. How? By the coming of Titus. So what did Titus do? He came. That's all he did. And it changes everything for Paul. It didn't change his circumstances. It's not like Titus came and made the problem go away. He couldn't make the problem go away. But what Titus did do is he showed up and he came. And that strengthening presence for Paul made all the difference to be able to get through what he had to go through, because he wasn't alone and he had strength from a trusted friend to say, "You know what, I can do this." And all Titus did, I'm sure he said something, I'm sure he did a few, but all he did, really, the power of what he did is show up. Through this message, preparing it, started thinking about different times in my life and for Christine and me and our family, different things that had happened when certain people just showed up and how powerful that was. One of those stories is my oldest son, Colin. When he was I think he was in third grade, went to a church camp, and at church camp, he and his buddies during free time were out on this basketball court, this concrete slab with these basketball goals, and this little group of geniuses thought this was a great idea to take a picnic table close by, pull it underneath the rim, the basketball goal, so they could, it has like a seat and then the table. And so, man, if we jump on the seat and then the table, I bet we could dunk, even though they're in third grade. Again, genius idea, right? You're like, yeah, that's a good idea. So Colin was the first one to do it, and he, sure enough, he jumps on the thing, jumps on the seat, jumps on the table to do the dunk. What they didn't think about was the landing. So he sort of does this dive head first onto the concrete, and which means he goes to the hospital. And I get a call from this hospital in East Texas that says, your son has a skull fracture. He has bleeding and swelling in the brain. We can't treat that here. So we're about to put him on a care flight to go to Children's Hospital in Dallas. He should be there in an hour and a half. Christy was outside teaching swim lessons, went and got her. We go down to Children's Hospital. We had no idea the extent. They wouldn't tell me. They said, we don't know. How bad is it? Is he going to make it? We had no idea. So we drive down to Children's Hospital, and then we have to wait for the helicopter. And it was the longest hour and a half of our lives, right? Just waiting, not knowing what's going to happen. And in the middle of that, while we're there waiting, feeling so alone and so scared, a couple came who were Chase Oakers, Mike and Sharon Cornwall. Mike and Sharon are still in our church. They go to our Richardson campus. They are, for many years, were elders here, which means board of directors. If you think about it that way, the Bible adds a bunch of spiritual stuff on top of that. But think of it, if you don't know what elders, kind of sounds weird, I know, but it's a thing, Bible thing. And like a board of directors. And so really godly, wonderful people. They're the kind of people who say when they pray, like, hey, I'll pray for you. It's not just like a way to say goodbye. They're really going to pray. And man, when they came, when they showed up, I still remember, just you see them and it's like, you know what? We're going to make it. It's the strengthening, like how God comforts us through the coming of people like Titus or people like the Cornwalls. And they didn't fix Colin. They didn't fix the situation. They couldn't. But what they could do, they did do. They showed up. And that changed everything for us internally, right inside. And yes, Colin did recover. It took months to recover, but he did. And we had a lot of Chase Oakers who showed up in the midst of that and have showed up for us over the years. And some of you know who you are, and we really love you and thank you for that. But that's what we're talking about. So let me make this really, really practical as you think about people in your life. And let me encourage you to think of somebody, because there's plenty of people to go around right now who are overwhelmed in a pandemic. People who are overwhelmed with grief because of what's going on with race. People who are trying to school their kids and have a job and don't know what to do. And people who are just going through the natural tragedies of life that happen, of sickness or the loss of a loved one. So I'm sure there's somebody in your orbit you can think about. And what do you do? I mean, what does it mean to show up? Because, how do you do that well? And one of the things to think about is often I think it's awkward because you don't know if you should. Like, what if I'm just going to be in the way? Like, am I really going to be one of those encouraging people to them, or are they going to roll their eyes when they see me? Like, are they going to be like, oh, good grief, now we got to deal with this person? Or, am I just going to make it worse, or they don't have time for me, or whatever? And what I'd say to that is if you're a friend with somebody, not just an acquaintance, but you're a friend with somebody who, and all that, and you have that inkling, and I really should reach out to them. And it could be calling them, starting out, or going there. I mean, now in COVID season, I know it's tricky, but, showing up at the hospital or doing whatever, or sometimes a little difficult right now. But you think, man, how do I reach out to them? Should I not? I don't know. I would say make the tilt to saying, do it. And then be open-handed. And if you find when you call or you show up or you're there that, maybe you are in the way and they've got it covered, all that's cool. Just back off and try again later. And, don't, but it's better, I think, to move forward than just to not. And then when you do step forward, what do you mean? Like, what do you do? Because it is awkward. Like, what do I say? Like, what if I say the wrong thing? What do you say to somebody who just lost a child? What do you say to somebody who is scared? What do you say to somebody who's depressed? Because we all want to just say the perfect thing. And again, this is not about saying the perfect thing, about doing the perfect thing. It's about showing up. But to make it really clear or really practical, here's how you show up. It's the power of presence, prayer, practical help. 3 P's. I'm kind of proud of them. So here they are. The first one, just being honest, is presence, the gift of presence. We've talked about that. Just showing up is way more powerful than you think. And you know that when you think back in your life of people who showed up, because you probably don't remember what they say or what they did. You just remember they showed up. And that's the power of presence. Prayer. Prayer is not just a psychological crutch or a psychological exercise. Prayer is talking to the God who is in charge of everything, who answers prayer. Prayer moves the hand of God. And when you and I pray, it matters. It changes things. And that's why it is so helpful to pray and to let people know you're praying, or even if you're comfortable praying out loud with them and just saying, can I pray? Let's pray. And when life is, what I found is sometimes there have been times I've been so upset or so anxious that I can't pray for myself. I just can't. And other people have come around who've said, I can, and who've prayed for us or prayed for me. It's a powerful thing to pray. I remember one of these other times in our life when somebody showed up was our younger son, Caleb, youngest son, and when he was just a little baby, just born, and he had some things that were not right and that they were concerned about, so they were going to put him in the NICU. And we were just being told this about what was going on, and here's this little baby, and we're so, we're in shock. And I remember looking through, we were in this hospital room, I remember looking through the window. We never even talked to him. He never even came in the room. Looking through the window, and I saw another one of our elders, another one of our board members named Jim Harris at the time. And Jim was there, and I saw him through the window. We had eye contact, and he just went like this. Meaning, man, I'm praying. And that changed everything again for me. It gave me this strength. It's like, okay, we are not on our own. We've got people who are praying, and either this little guy is going to be okay, or God's going to help us get through it if it's not. And it gave us strength, right, to keep going through it. Prayer is a powerful thing. And then practical help. What does Paul say to Timothy? Hey, come, and when you come, bring my cloak. He's talking about his they wore these big, thick outer jackets in the winter that were also like their blanket when they slept, these big wool things. And Paul had left it, and now it's coming winter, and he's in a dungeon, and there's no heat. And so he's saying, bring my cloak, and bring my books, and bring my stuff, because I don't want to just sit around. I want to do work. And so bring just practical help. And that's another thing to consider is just help. And sometimes it's great to ask people, hey, what can I do? But a lot of times people say, oh, no, we're okay. So you just do it. Just bring food. Or take care of kids, or, whatever practical stuff there is. It's hard to think about the practical stuff when you're going through a really tough situation and you're overwhelmed, and it helps to have other people come in and just do the practical stuff. So when you're thinking about what does it mean to show up, the 3 P's, presence, prayer, and practical help. And let me encourage you to take a step towards somebody. I mean, even, some of you, I thought about this. I didn't think about it till today. I should have thought about it earlier. But, with empty nest, people who are in empty nest stage, to, if they've got a little bit extra time, to just volunteer for a family who's working and has little kids. Hey, if I can help you with schooling, let me know, or whatever, right? You just come and you move into that situation. But then on the other side, I know some of you right now that are listening feel very overwhelmed. And you feel like Paul did, you feel very alone. You're like, it'd be great to have people like that, but I don't have them. And if you're going through something and you feel that way, let me encourage you to do a couple things. One is reach out to people, but you think, well, I don't know who. Well, you can reach out to the church. Let us know, and we'll do what we can. We care about you. We love you. Let us know. And the other thing that we can take for granted in Paul, but let's not, is the presence of the Lord in our life. He says, but the Lord stood by my side and gave me strength. People in our lives are important, and that's the point of this message, is how to show up and how to be there. And it's one of the ways God strengthens us and helps us is through other people. So I don't want to minimize that. But I also want to make it really clear that even more important than that is having the Lord at my side. It's having the Lord in my life. As I said earlier, I don't know how people go through tragedy, how people go through anxiety, how people go through depression. I don't know how they go through an overwhelmed period of life without the Lord in their life. I just can't even imagine. As I look back at different things in my life, how I could have possibly gone through that. And I look back at my life and realize, the Lord really was with me all those times. And He provides strength, He provides hope, He provides help, and helps us get through what we're going through. And if you don't have the Lord in your life or don't know what I'm talking about, you have to please know that He wants to be in your life. That's why Jesus is God who came here and became human, took on humanity. He's existed forever. He's God, but took on humanity and lived among us and suffered like we suffer. And He died on the cross for sin, our sin, to make it possible for us to be reconciled to God so that God could come into our life. And He offers that salvation, we call it, which is salvation from the penalty of sin. And He offers His strengthening and transforming presence in our life as a gift. He won't just push His way into your life. He wants us to say yes or no. It's a gift. And you just say, yes, Lord, I want you in my life. He is ready to come into your life. And you can do that right now. Just say, Lord, yes, I want a relationship with you. Jesus died on the cross for my sin. He rose from the dead. He wants to raise me up to new life. You want to be with me to transform me and comfort me and strengthen me through all that we go through. I'm in. God, please come into my life. And as important as it is to have other people, it doesn't even compare to having God in our life. And let me encourage you to take that step. So let's bow together right now in prayer wherever you are and pray with that in mind and with each other in mind as well. Father, do pray for people right now who want to take that step we just talked about. Lord, I pray you just help them because you've done everything to make that possible, for sin to be forgiven and for you to come into our life. And so, God, help them right now in their heart. Just say, yes, God, I want you in my life. I want to know you. I want to begin a relationship with you. I need you in my life. And that's what it means to begin a relationship with God. And the Bible says that when we take that step, He says in Hebrews, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. In another place it says in the Bible, if we deny Him, He will not deny us, for He is faithful, meaning He's not going anywhere. Once we ask Him in our life, He is with us always, and we will be with Him forever. And some of you right now know Him, but maybe you just need to lean on Him more and just say, God, you know what I'm going through. And I don't want to get angry with you because you didn't make it happen. We broke the world. And so, Father, I pray that you would strengthen me, that you would redeem this in my life. God, help me get through what I'm going through. And then let me encourage you, if God has brought somebody to mind right now, just pray for them. Somebody who's struggling. And just ask God, God, what do you want me to do? How can I show up in their life? Father, thank you that you care for us and that you will empower us to care for each other. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, normally, a lot of times I disappear after I say amen, and then those other two guys come on, when you watch online, and that's always great. But I'm still here, and I'm here for a reason, and that is to encourage all of us with something that was mentioned in the service earlier, and that is this next week is Unity Table Week, Unity Table Weekend, the fifth Sunday of every month. And right now in our culture, the spirit of our age, unfortunately, is polarization, right? And people pulling apart into different tribes, and it's us versus them, and it's just growing. And I think I know Satan loves it and is working overtime, not only to make that happen in our culture, but to make that happen in church. And to pull us apart any way he can, because people have strong opinions, right, about should we regather, should we not regather? Is the virus a big deal? Is it a little deal? Is, election season, this versus that, this person versus that person, and race, and sort of this new civil rights era in a resurgence. And some are like, yeah, and some are like, I don't know. And so everybody's pulling apart and all this kind of, and the Spirit of God is doing something else. And what he is doing in his church is bringing people together who should not otherwise be together. It's what Jesus prayed for in John 17, this uncommon unity of diverse people who move toward each other, not away from each other. And that's what God calls us to do. And the Spirit of God always moves toward unity, never toward polarization. And so let's move toward unity, toward understanding. And one way to do that, especially on the issues of race, is the unity table. And the idea there is to get together. If it's a Zoom meeting, that's great right now, or get together in person and figure out how to do that in a good way if you want to. And just somebody who's different than you, somebody who looks different than you, somebody from a different ethnicity. And it's a way to share your story, because doing so breaks down barriers, builds bridges, and you realize breaks down stereotypes. And we all have a story to tell. And if you go on our website, you'll see the Unity Table thing. There's a one-page guide on how to do that, like what questions to ask to get the discussion going. But I promise you, it'll be a fruitful thing. It'll be an eye-opening thing if we do it. So let me encourage you to take that step as we move toward each other in a culture that's just being ripped apart. God wants us to do better than that, and I know we want that too. So this is just one way to do that. The next fifth Sunday comes around Thanksgiving, and we've coming up with some cool ways to do that. Partner with some other churches. I think that's going to be a really awesome thing as well. So thanks for leaning into that. You can go on the website for more information. We'll see you next week as we continue our series, Secret Sauce. Next week is when we talk about how to have hard conversations that hopefully work, that don't just cause it to blow up, but actually work, and how to do that. In the meantime, please know you are loved, and we're praying for you. Hang in there. See you next week.